Welcome back to the Soul and Success Academy on the Spiritual UPlevel Podcast. I'm your host, Jeri Cristine, and I share tips and tools for soul-aligned success. On today's episode, we are going to discuss the importance of how you speak to yourself, the way that your mind talks to you. And it might seem so simple, but I would argue that this is possibly the single most important thing that you can get right in order to have success and to live a happy life in general. So let's think about it. When you look in the mirror, what do you say to yourself? As you go about your day, what are the words that go through your mind in regards to yourself? Are they positive and uplifting? Do you have a cheerleader or a coach in your mind that is always rooting you on to do bigger and better things, telling you that it's possible, that you're amazing, that you are valuable? Or do you have somebody in your mind who is always beating you up and telling you that you're not good enough and questioning who you are and what you're doing and the value of what you have to offer this world? Again, it may seem super simple. Perhaps you're not saying things like, I hate you, you're the worst, but maybe you're saying little things like, I look fat in these jeans, or I'm old. I know those are a couple things that come out of my mind, and thankfully my family reminds me when they do. Do you hold yourself back from trying new things or going on adventures because you're constantly questioning if you'll be safe or if you can do it, or who am I to think that I can do this? Those little things creep into our mind, and that's common for me, even with this podcast and the coaching that I'm doing. I had built a career in the real estate world, and after 20 years, I had enough evidence to prove to myself that I was good at it. And now I'm doing something different. And I would be lying if I said that I never questioned myself. I question myself all the time. I want to make sure that what I'm doing is adding value to people and that it's impactful for people. And in, this environment where I'm just building what I'm doing, I don't always get a lot of feedback. And so it's easy to let, the negativity creep in and the questioning and, the concern. And that's why it's so important to become aware of how you speak to yourself and make sure it's as impactful and positive and encouraging as you possibly can, because those little negativities that creep in can easily and quickly become the things that make you stop what you're doing or make you not even try in the first place. Yeah, as many of you know, if you've been following my podcast, I'm also a survivor of childhood abuse, sexual abuse. For people who have abuse as a child, it's very, very common for shame to be the guiding emotion in one's life. And that was certainly the case for me. And so you can imagine, if shame is your guiding force, how you speak to yourself. It's constantly, I'm a bad person, I'm not good enough. If they truly know me, they're going to know how bad I am. Or if they truly know everything about me, they're not going to like me, which is actually completely the opposite of the truth. But that is the guiding emotion, the guiding thought, the guiding, chatter in the mind. And so I know this topic inside and out because it has taken decades of self-development and work in order to overcome those thoughts. We talked about last week how our mind focuses on 126 bits of information at any given moment, despite the fact that there's 2 million or more bits of information coming into our mind at any given moment. The way you speak to yourself completely influences the 126 bits of information that you focus on. If you think that you're a bad person, your mind is going to find evidence to prove that right. If you have a fight with your husband and you're mad at him, your mind is going to find evidence to prove that he's a bad guy. But if we can switch our focus and we can switch our thoughts, all of a sudden, that is how our world changes, because our focus changes. If we believe, okay, I had a fight with somebody, but they're a good person, your mind is going to soften and you're going to look for reasons why they're a good person, and therefore be more willing to move forward on rectifying the situation. And it's the same with yourself. If you think you're a good person, if you know that you're valuable, your mind will focus on its 126 bits on things that prove to yourself that you are valuable and you have worth, and that you should try new things, and that you can go for your dreams. And it just becomes a completely different life after a while of focusing on this. And so that is my tool for today. I simply want you to keep a notebook, not anything electronic. I want you will want to write this down, and I'll explain why in a second. Physically keep a notebook where you're writing down how you talk to yourself. So on one page, the positive things, because there will be positive things in there. It's very extremely rare for there not to be anything positive at all. It can happen, girl, boy. Now I talk to myself very negatively for years. So it can happen. Don't beat yourself up, please, if everything seems to be negative. On another separate piece of paper, you'll want to write down everything that you say to yourself that is negative or disempowering. And again, this isn't just the I hate myself, I'm fat, I'm a bad person. This can be I'm afraid to quit my job and go for my dream. I am afraid to travel. What if something bad happens? It's fears. The fears and the negativity can all go on one list. That's your negative list. Separately, again, on a separate piece of paper, is your positive list. So these are all the things that you say to yourself that are positive. And you'll want to do this over a period of about a week, because different things will pop up on different days. You know, giving more time allows this to be more complete and more full. So really take the time to do it. And then at the end of that time frame, a week or whatever time frame you choose, go back through your list, and for every negative, you will cross it off and write a positive on your positive list. Every single negative has got to be crossed off with a positive written on the positive list. If you struggle to come up with a positive, please reach out to me. I would love to help you come up with a positive. And preferably, the positive should be something that you can believe. So if a negative is, I never have any money, a positive could be, I am abundant. So you can see different ways that you can be abundant in your life. Perhaps you struggle, perhaps you really aren't able to see how you can be abundant with money, or if your negative is I never have any money and your positive is I have plenty of money, but in the back of your mind you're saying no you don't, like the evidence is in the checkbook, that's not going to work. That's why I say make the positive something that you can believe, at least somewhat. If your negative is, I'm not worthy, your positive can be, I have worth. If your negative is, everything always goes wrong for me, the positive may be, I am exactly where I'm supposed to be, or everything happens in God's timing. Things like that. Once you have gotten every single one crossed off with a positive next to it, and please don't group them. I've had people group them before and put, 3 or 4 positives or 3 or 4 negatives, and they have one positive. Please don't group them. And please take some introspective time to make a new positive for every single negative. Let's don't group the negatives. It works so much better if you have a new positive for every single negative. So now you'll have 2 lists. You'll have the positive list that you had already started, plus it will include every single positive that you write for the negative list that you have. The negative list should have every single line crossed out on it. And now take that negative list, rip it out of your notebook, and burn it. Please do this somewhere safe, preferably outside in a fire-safe container. And you just light a match and burn it. This does 2 things. First of all, you are taking that paper with all the energy that you wrote, all of the emotion that you wrote in those negative lines, and you are transmuting that energy into another form. As we've talked about on multiple episodes, everything is energy. So you're literally transforming that negative energy into something different, which gives it back to the universe. And God, the universe, however you think of it, is more than capable of transmuting that energy into something positive. That's number 1. Secondly, what it's doing is creating a pattern interrupt. A pattern interrupt. What that means is that it is giving your brain an anchor as a memory. This will become a core memory if you do this exercise fully and engage with it. The burning of the paper will become a core memory or an anchor in your brain, so that when in the future you say one of those negative things, you will have this memory. No, I burned it. And I also crossed it off and wrote a positive, and here's what I'm choosing to believe. Of course, burning this list doesn't just make everything go away and all of a sudden you always think positively. That's not how our minds work. Your mind has formed a synapses. The synapses used over time has created a valley. It is the easiest way for your brain to think. Our brains move in patterns and they always choose the easy route. So following that old pattern is still going to be the easiest route. So your brain is going to think the thought. However, now we have a pattern interrupt that will interrupt that thought from going all the way through. And you are able then to make a conscious decision to think a different thought. So this takes repetition. It takes effort. It takes building that new muscle, that new synapses, and the new valley or ridge in the gray matter of your brain. However, doing this repeatedly over time will begin to form new synapses, new easy routes for your brain to think. And all of a sudden you will realize, I don't think those thoughts anymore. That actually happened to me while I was just talking. One of my main thoughts used to always be, I don't have any money. I don't have enough money. Always, negative with money, regardless of how much money I had or how much wealth I had acquired. Always that was my thought. I used this tool repeatedly over time, and I don't have that thought anymore. I had to consciously think about that thought and what would be the negative for it, because it's just not a thought in my brain anymore. And 2 years ago, even, I would have not thought that was possible, because I worked on it for years in order to get it out of there. And it's finally out of there. I just don't think that anymore. I think in abundance. And so it's possible, regardless of how you think, regardless of, how bad maybe you speak to yourself, it is completely possible to change it. And I know that you can do it. And I'm sharing this tool because of how impactful it's been for me. And I have so much compassion and love for each of you. And I want to see your life just be as amazing and positive and wonderful and filled with joy as it can possibly be. I want to give you a few of my favorite positive sayings. If you've heard me talk before, I'm not a huge proponent of affirmations, because again, if you don't believe them, you say it to yourself and you have that negative, disbelief in your mind. Like again, if it's, I don't have any money, and you say, I am wealthy, and your brain's like, no, you're not, like that, it's not going to work. Right. And so I like to come up with positives that you can believe. For example, I used to always say to myself, what's the worst that could happen? And honestly, that thought I thought wasn't that bad of a thought, because I would think of the worst and I'd be like, okay, I can handle that. And then I would do whatever risky thing I was considering doing. However, now, instead of what's the worst that could happen, I say, what's the best that could happen? And my mind figures out, what are the best things? What are the great things that could come from it? I am enough. I am enough. That is another great positive statement that can be kind of a blanket statement for several different negative thoughts. So choose one that you're struggling with and maybe insert that as a positive. I am enough. Another one is, I am right where I'm supposed to be. If you're struggling with the thought that nothing good ever happens, or you're too old, or you're too young, or, I'm right where I'm supposed to be. Everything happens in God's timing. Everything happens in God's timing is another great one. And then this isn't something I want you to use as a positive statement. However, this can help you to come up with positive statements. And the statement or the question is, what is the lesson in this for me? What is the lesson in this blank situation for me? And think about this. What is the lesson for me? This is not about somebody else. You may have a lot of emotions and energy and feelings around a situation with somebody else. The lesson isn't for them. The lesson, turn it back around. The lesson is for you. Realize whenever you're pointing a finger at someone, you've got 3 fingers pointing back at you. So this is a lesson for you, and it is a positive lesson. God gives us positive lessons. If we are able to step back, give ourselves a little bit of space from the situation, you will be able to see at some point that there's a positive in this for you. It may be hard to admit. There are difficult, hard situations that it may be hard to admit that there's a positive in there, but there is always a positive. So look at it from that perspective. And when you do, your mind will be able to come up with positive statements that reflect any negative thoughts that you're thinking for that situation. Again, I really want to encourage you, if you've made it this far in this video, good job. I know that you'll be able to do this and you'll put a lot of energy and effort into it. It's another simple tool. Everything that I share are simple tools, but they're super effective. And I share them because they're tools that I've used in my life, and it's transformed my life. And that's really what I wish and hope for you. Again, if you have any questions or you're stuck with a negative, you're stuck coming up with a positive, please let me know. I would love to help you. Thank you for joining me on this episode, and I look forward to seeing you on the next ones.